All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone, if you are on the East Coast, and good morning if you are on the West Coast or somewhere in between. Thanks for being here for today's Bloomerang webinar, Events in a Digital Age, How to Maximize Offline Events in an Online World. And my name is Stephen Shattuck, and I'm the Chief Engagement Officer over here at Bloomerang, and I'll be moderating today's discussion, as always. And just a couple of housekeeping items before we begin. Just want to let you all know that we are recording this presentation, and I'll be sending out the recording as well as the slides. If you hadn't already gotten those, you'll get them again with the recording. So don't have to worry if you have to leave early or maybe want to review the content later on or share it with a coworker or a friend. I definitely would appreciate that as well. So just look for an email from me in just a couple hours after we conclude here with all those goodies. Most importantly, as you're listening today, please feel free to use that chat box right there on your webinar screen. I know a lot of you have already, so thank you for that. We're going to save some time at the end for Q&A, so don't be shy about questions and comments. I'll keep an eye on those throughout the hour, and we'll try to answer just as many as we can before the 2 p.m. Eastern hour. You can also use Twitter to do that. I'll keep an eye on the Twitter feed as well. And one last bit of technical note, if you have any trouble with your audio through your computer speakers, try dialing in by phone if you can, and if you don't mind doing that. We find the phone quality is a little bit better than the computer speaker quality for listeners. So there is a phone number that you can dial in the email from Ready Talk that went out around noon Eastern today. So give that a try before you give up on us completely. Usually the phone is a little bit better. And if this is your first Bloomerang webinar with us, I just want to say an extra special welcome. We usually get a few first-timers every week we do these. Just wanted to say thanks for being here and taking an hour out of your day. And if you don't already know about Bloomerang, we offer donor management software. That's kind of our core business. We do these webinars and lots of other educational things, but the software is what we're most known for. So if you're curious about that or want to check us out, maybe thinking of switching sometime soon, visit our website. Don't do that now. Wait until an excellent presentation, because you're about to get one. I got one of my favorites, Dana Ostomel, joining us from beautiful New York. Hey, Dana, how's it going?
Hi, everyone. Very, very good. Thank you.
Yes, thanks for being here. Super excited for this presentation. I was just chatting with Dana for man, it flew by because we're good buddies. It's always good to see her in person and also have her on our webinar series. If you guys don't know Dana, I just want to brag on her really quickly for you. She is the Vice President of Nonprofit Industry Development over at Firespring, which is, again, one of my favorite companies. So we got two of my favorites represented here today. They do a great job of producing software and websites for nonprofits. Prior to joining Firespring, Dana was the founder of Deposit a Gift, which is a great crowdfunding platform that a lot of nonprofits use. A lot of them use both that and Bloomerang. And now she is the crowdfunding expert over at Firespring, and you're going to see a lot of that knowledge come out in her presentation today. Frequent conference speaker, webinar presenter. If you see her name on a conference schedule, get to that room early. Trust me, I have witnessed this firsthand. That room usually fills up really quickly and is standing room only. And she's worked with tons of companies in her career helping with marketing, brands like Snapple, MasterCard, DirecTV. Super awesome person, and I'm going to hand it over to her because she is going to tell you all about a multi-channel approach to events. So Dana, my friend, take it away, okay?
Wonderful, and thank you for your kind words. I appreciate it. How's the sound, everyone? I'm just switching over to my PowerPoint visual so you guys can see, and I'm putting it in presentation mode, so I actually can't see the Ready Talk thing anymore, but Stephen, did the slides look okay, nice and big?
Yeah, looks like it's working.
All right, cool. All right, wonderful. Well, thank you guys. Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here. We always do a little bit of our own welcome slide. We probably should have nixed this, but in any event, here's a little reminder about Twitter and where you can find us. And of course, as Stephen said, you're going to get the slides and the recording very shortly after this webinar being over. If this is your first webinar where you're hearing from those of us at Firespring, I always love to just give a bit of orientation about who we are and what we're about. I'm actually located in New York City here. This is where I live, where I work, where I built my company before we joined forces with Firespring, and then I just continued to work here remotely. Firespring is located in Lincoln, Nebraska, so right there in the heartland. That's where the whole team is, ready to support you, talk to you, answer any questions you have. And then I always mention that I'm a born and raised California girl, so hopefully a little bit of a hybrid of a human, although crazy enough it's starting to be where I've almost lived half my life on each coast, which I don't know what that means, but it is a fact. Let me tell you something about Firespring that this is just kind of a personal story, something that really spoke to me when I was getting to know the company a couple years ago actually. Before we joined forces, and I learned about them being a B Corp. And some of you might know about that designation. B Corps are benefit corporations like Warby Parker, Tom's Shoes, Ben & Jerry's, Patagonia. And so we're all mission and purpose-driven companies where we are committed to not only developing and growing our businesses, but also giving back to the community and making the world a better place. The way that Firespring lives those values is through something that we call our Power of Three program, where we leverage our people, our products, and our profit as a force for good, and donate 3% of each of those back to the community. And I can tell you that I guess getting to know Firespring, knowing that that's both what the company is designated as, but also really the values that all of the employees there live. And I can tell you that every Firespringer really does get up every day looking to bring it. That's one of our values, bring it every day, so that everything that we put into our products, our services, our education is top-notch and really beneficial to all of you guys who really are the change makers of the world. And we want to make sure that whatever we're offering is really helping you do your work and make the world a better place, and just hoping that we're doing our small part here in that way. We've got two slides here of locations, and this also just shows you where Bloomerang is right there in Indiana. So let's talk about today's objective. I want to talk about why we're here today. When we put together this webinar, it's actually relatively new. We wanted to focus on helping the community widen the lens through which you view your events, right? So everything from planning to execution, so that they include digital from the get-go. I mean, the reality is that we just don't live in a world where digital is optional anymore, but many of us are still approaching our events in that way. So if you live in that camp, my hope is that by the end of this webinar, we've at least helped tweak your mindset a little bit, focused you on the most important elements to tackle first, ensuring that you have an understanding of the technology that you have at your fingertips to really make that easy. Because I know for a lot of organizations, special events are a core part of what you do for development and community cultivation. And then now there's this whole thing called the Internet and digital tools. And wait a minute, how are we supposed to bring those things together, kind of knowing in the back of our mind that it's what we should be doing, but when something is new and kind of foreign, I think it's challenging. So here's what we're going to go over today, and I hope it's helpful, especially if you work in a team environment, which most of us do. I really want to make sure that you have the language necessary to guide the conversation internally, especially if this is something that you believe in, that you're like, okay, we need to up our game. We need to integrate digital into what we're doing for special events, but not everyone on my team is on board, or they kind of get it, but they don't fully understand, or we just aren't fluent to be able to have that conversation internally. We don't have the language to be able to sort of go through our options and figure out what makes sense for us and what doesn't. So that's actually one of the most important things today, is just making sure that you have the language and the nomenclature to really be able to discuss your options. And then also I wanted to go through all the digital resources that are available, like functionally speaking. I'm not going to go through and mention all the different companies out there, but I am going to talk about what you need to know to evaluate, like the tools you should be thinking about. What are, if you're going to do one thing, what is the most important thing to do? And so hopefully you'll get the language and you'll get the know-how about the resources you will need to execute and be in a good place to make some decisions for your next event. So let's just make sure we're on the same page. I want to start with some basics in the interest of language. And I'd like to start by defining what a special event is so that we're all starting from the same place. And actually, I used a really great report that Stephen shared with me that Bloomerang was a part of sponsoring. The main sort of author was Plymouth University, and then Bloomerang and a bunch of other companies sponsored the effort, and it was called the Great Fundraising Events Report. And this report defined a special event as a planned public or social occasion to achieve specific goals. And if you don't already hold special events or you're just looking for some ideas, what I wanted to do just as a starting point was to give you like the top 15 most common event types to just get your wheels turning. And you may see on here some events that you already do. You might be thinking about wanting to do some new ones, and this will give you some thematics to consider. Here's what we know about special events. We know that donor-centric events perform best. And research shows that there are actually 7 key motivations for donors, which is what we've outlined here. And although it seems obvious, it's not always considered, but it is easier to exceed expectations if you know who you're catering to and what drives them. So you always want to begin with that end in mind. And of course, this is the marketer in me coming out, like thinking about mindset and segmentation and psychographics, but I really do believe that's important in any initiative that you do. So what you want to do is think about the personas, right? Who are the different people that support your organization? Identify who it is that you're trying to connect with for this particular event. And I think that identifying or outlining these personas is especially helpful when briefing event planners, or even if you're not going to bring an event planner on and you are running the event, but you're going to bring in other people. Obviously, you can't do it alone, so volunteers even or other team members to help you. This helps you come to the table with an outline of the vision for the event, what you're trying to achieve, and who the target audience is. And then this helps everyone get aligned. Because really, whether it's an event planner or an internal team, you are then able to focus on the needs of these very specific individuals that you have in mind and plan an experience they would find deeply moving and personally meaningful. And we know it's that emotional connection that motivates people, that galvanizes people to take action on our behalf. And of course, there is always a desired action for these events, and we're going to get to in a second the different things we might be looking to get out of our events. And it really behooves you when you do start doing an event to think about that and sort of back into who then might be attending, what are your desired outcomes, et cetera, and then plan something. And frankly, even if you've been doing the same event, year after year, a lot of times I find people attend this webinar because they have been doing the same event every year, but they sort of hit a plateau, right? So they haven't really moved the needle on donations, or less people have been coming, or it's always the same people have been coming, and they want to kind of shake things up a little bit. So even if it's an event you've been doing forever, you might do this type of analysis. So before diving into the most important digital aspects to consider, we want to talk for a minute about measurement. And I'm just curious, and I know Stephen's moderating in the chat box, and you're welcome to kind of chime in if I bring up any thoughts or ideas or ask any questions, because he'll kind of use that as fodder for our Q&A at the end. But I'm curious how often you've put on an event without thinking about what you're trying to achieve in a truly focused way. And maybe even putting on an event without setting out some specific objectives that you can measure against to determine the success of that event. And if this is you, you're not alone. So it's nothing to be embarrassed about, but it is something to think like, okay, you know what, if we want to up our game a little bit, measurement is a key component of these events, and we can develop those parameters and create systems and tools to help us figure out if we're kind of moving the needle on our events. So beyond raising money, which is what most of us hope to ultimately achieve, what are the less obvious key objectives to measure event success that you might want to consider? Now, I know that you won't be trying to achieve all of these for any one particular event, but what I did want to do is just review what the most common objectives for events overall could look like. So yes, it's about raising money, but it's also about raising awareness. And when you think about measurement in the form of increasing the visibility that allows you to engage more people within the context of a special event, you then want to think about what kinds of tactics you'd like to deploy that would have a very specific return. And so what I've done here is laid out for you the main goals for raising awareness and then offer some tactics for consideration. And I think when you look at the tactics, you'll note that they're sort of broken out into sort of the pre-marketing initiatives, right? What happens during the event and then the after. So really like the before, during, and after of the event. And what we're trying to do obviously is increase visibility for our event, especially in that early pre-marketing stage, and also increase visibility of our organization, trying to educate people on what we're about. And then of course, especially again in that pre-marketing period, we're trying to drive registrations. But I will say that you're going to hear me talk about some ideas for how you can even start driving registrations for the following year's event for people who are in attendance or people who are not in attendance. So I find some of these goals to be fluid, and I share that with you because I don't want you to think that it's sort of like, well, only during this time period do we do this one thing. There's a lot of fluidity here. Okay, yes, it's about raising money, but it's also about bringing new donors into the fold. And I think that one of the cool things about holding special events is that they are a great opportunity to get your inner circle of key supporters to invite their networks to attend and get people involved. So if this is something that's important to you, something that you might want to think about is establishing an actual goal targeting, X percent of new people in attendance or X percent of new people donating, really trying to draw a measurable line in the sand so that you can see if your efforts are working. And so what I've outlined here are maybe some goals to consider for why you might be wanting to identify new donors, raising more money, tapping into new networks, broadening that pipeline. And then here are some tactics to help you get there. So if there are ways for you to diversify the donation opportunities, meaning it's not just about buying a ticket, that's interesting. If you can create some gamification during your event, like some game kind of competitive element, that's interesting. Making sure that we are capturing all of attendee data electronically is really important, especially if you are an organization that has one person buying a table and then inviting guests that may not need to register. So these are just some things to think about from that perspective. And then of course, yes, it's about raising money, but so much of why we do special events is about donor stewardship and about creating opportunities to deepen relationships with our supporters and get them more involved. And this quote really spoke to me. This is something from the Fundraising Authority, which is a blog some of you may or may not follow. But I feel like it really centers us on why we do what we do with special events. And so what they say is that stewarding after a donation is like cultivating before a donation. It is a process by which the organization develops an ever stronger relationship with the donor and involves constant communication to deepen that relationship. And so much of why we do special events is sort of that in-person embodiment of all of our communications and cultivation. And then I think what's neat about being able to intertwine digital into this typically offline experience is that there's a lot that we can do to increase the communications and the touches to help deepen those relationships even more. So benchmarks you might consider are specific goals that get new donors more deeply entrenched. You might consider measuring the effect that showering an existing donor with gratitude has for their repeat support and sort of what that impact that could have on your event, especially if maybe your organization hasn't been great about implementing appreciation systems. And then even thinking about implementing a before and an after survey to gauge how your community feels about you. Those could all be interesting ways to create benchmarks and measurement systems. So this is a matrix that I really like that also came for that Sustainable Philanthropy report that I referenced before that Bloomerang was, had a role in bringing to life. And it outlines, it gives you a sense of what you should be focused on depending on what your primary goal is, as well as the outcomes you should expect to guide your work. I'm not going to go into all the detail. As Stephen said, you're going to get the slides at the end in the recording, and then you can kind of go through this. But I think this is a good way, and this is what I was talking about, kind of identifying what that end goal is and then backing into it, what your approach should be, and then of course who are your ideal target audience is to be there, what type of meaningful experience you want to craft for that particular experience to get the payoff for that particular goal. So unfortunately, when we talk to nonprofits, what we find is that most are still approaching their events in a very linear, non-integrated, non-digital way. And this approach can be a big missed opportunity for everything from streamlining administrative tasks to generating higher returns for the event. Like, it really runs the gamut. And so especially if you've been feeling like your special events have hit a plateau over the last few years, now I think is a good time to consider the impact of doing things a little bit differently. And here's what we know. What we know is that across all event types, digital makes a difference. In fact, Blackbaud recently did a study that found that nonprofits that email will raise more than those who don't email. And this was just their findings on the impact of email. And so to me, it's like kind of blows my mind a little bit, because I feel like we need to take it a step further mentally and say, well, can you imagine what's possible if you were to pull all the digital levers that you have access to? Email is just one component, and it's an important component, and certainly nonprofits could do a better job with how they leverage this, and then what else could they implement? So that's what we're going to be diving into today. But just as a recap, especially because I promised you the language to be able to go and have that really important debate internally to decide, okay, yes, we're going to add digital, but we can't do everything. So which components matter the most? I think just to ground ourselves, here is why this kind of change can be a good thing, a little cheat sheet, if you will. So it's about efficiency. It's about ease of use, which really does have a pretty material impact on participation. Digital helps you broaden your reach. It's less expensive, it's faster, and importantly, it is green. Now, for a lot of people, incorporating digital into their special events can be a little bit scary prospect, you might say, but we don't think it should be. I mean, granted, you could say, well, that's easy for you to say, Firespring people. You deal with digital and websites all the time, and that's true. But that's why we said, okay, let's break it down for people, and let's really show what sort of the life cycle of the digital gears for a special event. I wanted to share with you what that could look like. And also I wanted to highlight what I think some of the most important things are. So if you're picking and choosing what your next steps are, you can make some decisions, because obviously this is a process. These things evolve. And the way that we set up the gears, which is what's going to guide really the meat and potatoes of the rest of this conversation, is it's not so much in the order of importance. I did this more in the chronology, and then I will verbally highlight for you what I think is most critical to help you make some decisions. And then we can always talk through some things at the end. So let's start by talking about an evergreen home. And I find that this is like the one keyword that I use that people are like, huh, what are you talking about? So let me just break that down for you. An evergreen home is a dedicated website with a unique URL created just for the purposes of supporting the event. Right? It would be separate from your main website, and it lives all year long just talking about the event. Now, it can be especially helpful when you're trying to create a unique brand identity for your event. Evergreen homes are not going to be for everyone. It may be that you just have certain dedicated areas on your website, and that's also fine. It kind of depends what you're trying to do with your event. So the URL escapes me right now, but I'm thinking about like DoSomething.org, which is an organization that motivates people under 18 for having an impact on the world. Like they have a gala and they have a website that's up all year long. There's a variety of organizations that do this. And so what I'm going to do in the following slides is outline for you the different iterations that an evergreen website could take when you think about how it could work hard for you during the various stages of the life cycle of your event. So here's some ways that I think it can be really, really quite useful. It can be an archive for the previous year's information. When your event is over, you can turn it into a save the date. And then of course, when you're in the heat of the event, the evergreen home for your special event is a one-stop shop for all the details, and it's shareable and accessible at all times. So it's not like it goes dark ever. You just have someone who maintains it and kind of morphs the content to be appropriate for the timing. And the way that people will know to access it, because people often ask this question during Q&A, so I'll just jump into it now. They'll say, well, how will they know that it exists? If everyone always comes to our main website, like why in the world would they know about this website that's just for our special fundraising event? And the way that they know is by way of your marketing activities. So whether you drive them to it from an email or from a spotlight on your homepage or your social media, it's really all about the marketing. And even if you don't do an evergreen home for your event, right, because this is not one of those things that I'm going to say is a must-have, like you have to be doing this, but it is, I think, a cool thing that we're seeing as a trend, something to think about. Even if you just have certain dedicated areas on your website, people would find out about those dedicated areas in the exact same way, right? It's all about marketing. It's all about that unique call to action where you drive people to inquire about a next step. Now, we're going to look at the gear about registration, and I will tell you that probably the most important thing to consider in your digital arsenal, if you do nothing else, is registration. What you don't want is online frustration, right? You want online registration. And I hate to break it to you, but if what you have today is a PDF that you have to download and submit, that is not online registration. The number one reason that people will visit your website, and this has been proved through research, is to register for events. And really what you see on this slide here are just some key statistics as to why. I won't get into all the details. You'll get the slides, and hopefully this will be helpful if you are waging any sort of internal battle about if you should be taking registration online. But the top 3 tech tools for measuring event success are all tied to registration, management, and feedback. And obviously there are some massive efficiencies that you can get from having things done online. And when you do online registration today, it's almost always automatic no matter what tool you use, whether you choose Firespring or the various other ticket selling tools that are out there, that most of the modern technology is already mobile, right? You don't have to make it be mobile, but I think it is important that when you are figuring out which tool you want to use, it's just to make sure that it is mobile, because that is key. A lot of us really underestimate how much of our community wants to be able to register on the go via their phones, but really that is the way that things are moving. Now, if you've ever taken any other Firespring webinars, we have one that's all about the importance of landing pages. So if you've ever taken a landing page one, then you'll know that we talk a lot about the benefit of sending people to a dedicated page to take a desired focused action, which couldn't be more important than for special events where you don't want people getting distracted from the registration task at hand. And as you can see with a flexible registration landing page, which is what you're looking at right now, you have the ability to customize it with any type of ticket, sponsorships, or table that you'd like, and have the payment processing integrated right into the page. And that's really important for conversion. You don't want to be sending people off to another place, so like making a reservation on your website and then sending them off to PayPal to pay. Like if you're trying to sort of jerry-rig your website, it's time to move forward and remember that seamless, integrated, super smooth tools are critical, right? Because our expectation as just people, as humans, when we take ourselves out of, working at our organization and worrying about budgets and, kind of trying to cut corners here and there, just when you are someone who's online shopping, we all know what it's like to have a frustrating, clunky user interface experience. And what we expect is like, Amazon one-click shopping. We expect things to be that easy. And I will tell you, it's important for nonprofits to embrace that because it does actually impact how you convert, meaning how you get people to actually take the action you're driving them to do. So what I want to do now is help you identify your registration needs, meaning I want to talk about the functional requirements to support the registration for your event so that you have the language and know-how that you need to be able to look at all the different tools that are out there and sift or filter and kind of figure out which one is the right one for you. And I'll tell you what I think are like the key important things to consider. So the main thing is that you want to aim for keeping it really simple, which is why I was talking about, reducing the friction of sending people off, in one direction or another or having clunky pages. You want something with the credit card processing built right in, and you really want to keep it all clean, safe, and secure, right? All right on your own website. You do want to really consider choosing a system that allows you to create as many pricing tiers and ticket types as you want. So if you're dealing with a system that has any sort of limitations or, there are some, I know actually my daughter's school was just using something for an auction, which I know is a little bit different, but it was like, oh, you get this first X amount for free, and then if you want these other features, it costs you money. There's a reason companies do that. It's a gateway. It tries to get you in the door, and it may completely be fine for you. You might be able to survive on the free tools, or you might be cool paying for the additional, but just kind of know what you're getting into and know what it is that you need. You'll also want a system that allows you to set limits on capacity for various reasons. And those reasons could extend everything from, exclusivity to a physical location having limitations. So just, be really clear. And this is where we see the offline and online worlds, cross over. You really want to be considering everything from, the space to the people to the date, etc., and then make sure that your digital tools can support what you need. And then, of course, it wouldn't be an event without sponsorships. You definitely want to be able to sell those online as well. So you want to make sure you have a tool that gives you the ability to add sponsorship sales. Another interesting feature, I think, to consider when you're evaluating systems is the ability to pay now or later, kind of like a reservation system. Now, this can be great if someone wants to make a big donation, but maybe they're required to make the actual payment via check, right? And so, but you want everything to come through you digitally because, you're looking to make a change in terms of how your admin staff is impacted when putting on this event, right? And you want to make sure that you are just able to quickly print out a checklist or a registration sheet of everyone who's signed up. You don't want to have most people doing online and then some other people offline, and then you've got to merge, handwritten notes with digital notes, so things can get complicated and obviously set you up for mistakes. And so a reservation-like system can be pretty cool for various reasons that people need to do that. And if someone can't attend the event in person, I really believe in opening up the virtual doors in our events, inviting people to participate in other ways, such as with a donation. And just keep in mind, you don't get if you don't ask. That's kind of my motto. Don't ask, don't get. So you want to make sure that you've set up your online interface with this element included from the start so that you're extending this invitation and inviting them to be part of the fundraising effort in the way that is best for them. And I know that that might sound kind of obvious, or people might say, well, why do we have to say that? People can always just make a donation. But these things are like call and response. And you get what you ask for. You get what you make easy for people and what you invite them to get involved with. And really the way that I think about it is just that you want to meet people where they want to be met. so that your organization benefits. And then, of course, if you can take it a step further and make sure that that function of asking people for a donation has an option to make it recurring. I mean, again, just talk about greasing the wheel and making things really simple and actionable so people can kind of just take all the steps that they want to in that moment. That is what will benefit you and also will give them a really good user experience. Okay, let's talk about promoting your special event. Now, when it comes to special events, organizations typically tend to focus on the invitation and not on waging a full integrated marketing campaign to promote the event. My recommendation is that your promotional plans go beyond the invitation and the host committee, and that you leverage digital for the frequency it takes to generate the exposure and action that you're looking for. So for starters, plan to aggressively promote your event via email. Email is particularly effective for unrolling a story and for educating. And I think, here's one of the reasons why I think it's important. So organizations often use insider speak, right? Or they assume that everyone knows what they're talking about or that they know what event they're referencing. And that's not necessarily the case and actually can alienate people. However, if you think about your pre-marketing initiatives and you do like a teaser email campaign, you can not only build anticipation for your event, but you could also educate newbies about what's going on, why they should get involved, etc. And then email is also a really great way to send customized messaging to your list segments. Personal messages in general are much more difficult to delete or ignore. So like way back at the beginning of this webinar when we talked about knowing who the personas are that you're trying to cater the event to, hopefully as part of your development efforts in general, you're already segmenting people and kind of understanding where your supporters lie psychographically for you. And then, maybe within the parameters of this event, they may fall into different kinds of buckets. But knowing these things helps you write personal communications that people will be more apt to respond to. Now, beyond using email to promote your event, let's talk about the use of social media. And first, of course, you need to figure out the right platform for you. Since you can't and shouldn't be everywhere, you'll use social media to drive people to the key areas on your website to take desired actions. As you can see, Facebook is still the most popular social media platform and the most populated, and Twitter is a close second. A lot of how you're going to pick your platform is based on what your audience uses most, so you can be present where there is critical mass. The other thing I want you to consider is the message itself so that you can determine the right platform. And here's what I mean by that. Are you trying to make announcements that are not super time sensitive, or are you trying to do a chronological live stream with many concurrent posts? The answer to this question will impact your platform choice. So for example, Twitter is better for live streams. Facebook is better for messaging that isn't sensitive to or dependent on chronology. However, no matter what the platform that you use, hashtags have become increasingly important as a way to brand events and also create a conversation stream that generates buzz and engagement. So I really recommend that you come up with a hashtag for your event that you can implement across the board. And you'll hear me kind of talk about this again as we move forward because it's actually become a really important component of social media marketing. And so what I'd like to do now is break down for you the 3 stages of social media marketing for special events, because we already talked about email and the role that can play. I find that that's a little bit more easy for people to understand, but for a lot of folks it's the social media piece that gets rocky. And I will tell you that a lot of the things I'm talking about here in terms of before, during, and after, you could apply these concepts to other aspects of your integrated marketing program, but just for the purposes of this webinar, I'm going to focus on social media. So pre-event marketing, it's all about driving awareness, right? We're talking about registrations and whipping up an army of evangelists primed and ready to support you. The biggest mistake that people make with their executional content is in posting monotonous content that repeats the same message, just like over and over. And usually that message is a call to action to register. And so what you want to do is think about your messaging in terms of like what type of content actually makes you as a person click? Like, what is interesting to you? And it really should be no different for your special event marketing than your regular marketing. It's usually something based on good storytelling. And a best practice to keep in mind is to simply tell stories and then drop teasers that are relevant to the event, like just punctuating them with that call to action link instead of making the message all about the call to action. And then of course you tie it all together with that hashtag we were talking about. During the pre-marketing period, you will also need as many people as possible to give you access to their social capital. So it's not just the capital in the form of a ticket purchase or a donation that matters. What we're talking about is identifying key influencers that will give you access to their networks and invite people to get involved on your behalf. And once you identify these people, I would call them an online street team, or they might be your army of evangelists. Make sure that you make it really easy for them to advocate on your behalf. So that's everything from pre-written posts and pre-written emails that they can deploy to make it simple, because that social capital is becoming ever increasingly important. Now, your objectives will shift a little bit during your event because it's about creating an experience that is bigger than the event by way of social media engagement, right? That's one of the benefits of this aspect. And you can feature people who are there. You could even get your appreciation strategy started early with public shout-outs during the event. And just keep in mind that when you start doing this, you also expose your events to those who couldn't attend live, and you create social proof about how awesome your event was. And this will turn into content that you can use in the future. So speaking of crowdsourcing content, I want to really encourage you to use, I want to encourage you to actually encourage your community to use your hashtag in all of their posts, because that's actually what's going to make it easy for you to find and collect their pictures, their videos, their shout-outs, their testimonials for future use. Because you click on that hashtag or you search by the hashtag, and then everything just comes up sorted for you in one conversation. And you really do want to use this moment to generate the biggest content arsenal possible, because it will come in mega handy for you not that far down the road. So for optimal execution, we always recommend that you assign at least one team member to be in charge of live postings. Right? So this is the person who is charged with opening up the virtual doors on your event, and it really can be a job in and of itself. So you don't want to sort of take that lightly and not make sure someone's designated from the beginning. And you'll probably add some sort of live posting to the mix. So we want to give you something to think about in terms of which platform is better for ongoing flow of posting and which is not. As I mentioned before, Facebook is not ideal for ongoing live stream postings because it isn't built to be chronological. And the other thing to keep in mind about Facebook is that if you post too much, it can actually interact weirdly with their algorithm, versus Twitter, on the hand, was built for live chronological postings. During the event, you are going to be focused on collecting content for future use, which is what I was referring to before. So you have this person or team of people who are responsible for opening up the virtual doors on the event. And they're going to do lots of interaction, engagement with people. But also they're going to be charged with making sure that they track down the content and make sure that it's, hopefully their prompts are prompting your attendees to engage and post their pictures and say things. So you actually want to have a strategy for this piece of the execution. So part of that strategy is you have a plan for who's in charge. And I also recommend that you make a list of what you hope to collect by the end of the event. So because if you're looking for high quality video and pictures and quotes, you might even need more than one person to help you do it. So just kind of think through what your goals and objectives are, and then what kind of team members you're going to need to be able to make that happen. Now, once the event is over, it's all about engagement and learnings. You've just had an incredible opportunity for identifying hand raisers, and you don't want to let those leads go cold. So let's think about what you can do to make as many individuals feel totally awesome about attending your event or contributing in some way. Now, we'll get more into this as we talk about your appreciation strategy shortly, but why it's relevant here is because you can use social media to showcase people using the tag and thank method to give them public praise that their network sees and hopefully brings them closer to your brand and to your cause. And then the other thing you want to think about from a mass marketing perspective is of the post-event digital promotion. You want to think about leveraging social media and email to deploy surveys to get feedback. So with social media, maybe you take public polls and even share some of the content to keep people excited in the form of starting to market next year's event, just keeping them jazzed. With surveys, it may be you push that out over email or you even post the link through social media as well. All right, engagement. So yes, there is a big part of engagement with social media, and we just went through that, but also so much of that is just, it's about the marketing, right? I want to talk now about what was probably one of the biggest innovations for a lot of organizations, and that's the incorporation of technology into the event itself for increased community engagement. So in this section, I'm going to review a few of your options to get your juices flowing. Now, beyond attending an event, with technology today, we have a lot of options to meet people where they want to be met and offer them alternative opportunities to get involved. And sometimes these additional engagement touch points will serve as building blocks for people to one day attend in person. So I think, historically we sort of had this all or nothing approach to, you come or you don't come. But actually, what if we think a little bit longer term? We're trying to change the culture of engagement. We're trying to get new people into our pipeline. Well, we may need to create some building blocks to sort of help people dip their toe and get involved. Now, if you want to open up the virtual doors to your event, you can consider the use of technology so that it feels like they're almost there in person with you. You could stream the event. You could run live contests. You could encourage social media posting from people who aren't there. Again, oops, I got ahead of myself with the slide. Sorry about that. Again, with the hashtags, make sure that people are in the same conversation and make sure that they can find each other. This is another cool thing about hashtags. So one is it's used for branding. We talked about that. The second thing we said, it helps people be in the same conversation. It helps you find what people are talking about you. But it's also really great for people finding each other. And maybe you guys have even used this if you've gone to a conference. People are using the hashtag, and then you sort about like who's tweeting, and then you're like, oh, they're here, right? And then all of a sudden conversations ensue. So the hashtag, it's like a social media cataloging system. And so you want to use that for this engagement piece as well. Another thing, if you have people who maybe are less inclined to social media, is you can use email scheduling system to send timed messages with calls to action for during the event. So this is also can just be a great advertising mechanism for some of the tactics we talked about, like live streaming and running contests. You also want to think about your ability to stay with them after the event, right? So we know that swag does that. We're all familiar with the typical physical swag like bags and knickknacks, but I'm curious if any of you have ever thought about your digital options. So I came up with a bunch of ideas for you to kind of think about how you could do swag that's digital and maybe creates like teasers or reasons why, if they want to go download something, maybe they have to provide you with their email or engage with you in some way. And of course, it is never too early to start engaging people for next year's event. So try to have your digital presence ready to unveil at the event and come up with incentives to get people to pre-register. Even if they're not there, right? You can drive people who aren't there and say, hey, you can buy a ticket for a lower price tonight for next year. And just make sure that your celebratory email that you've already got queued up includes inviting them to next year's event. The other thing that I think is really important with engagement as part of wrap-up is soliciting feedback, right? And so just remember to send out an online survey to find out what people thought. And if you have an evergreen site, you might even have this be a built-in component, which is kind of cool. All right, our fifth and final digital gear is appreciation, and I know the Bloomerang folks are really big on this. In fact, Stephen did an awesome guest webinar with Firespring last week, and it was all about donor attrition and just about like all these follow-up metrics. And it seems to be one of the reasons why we lose donors, why we are subject to donor attrition, is because we're just not taking the time to build in appreciation systems. But I believe, and I'm pretty sure Stephen feels the same way, you can never say thank you enough. And yet organizations don't necessarily think about things that way. So I'm hoping we can change that a little bit. The immediacy of the thank you is much more critical than you might think. And again, I think Stephen went over that in his webinar last week, which if you're interested, you can get a copy of from him or me. People give to your organizations to get the warm fuzzies, but they can only get them when they're acknowledged and when they're acknowledged in a timely way. And that is our job. So there really is a direct correlation between the timing, the consistency, and the donor centricity of our gratitude and how our donors feel about us. And the truth is it's not that hard to achieve this with some planning, some structure, and some commitment. So to make sure, I really want to help you make sure that you very deliberately and in advance craft your post-event appreciation strategy so that you're ready to move forward with these amazing hand raisers you just garnered from your event. You know, in the business world or in the for-profit world, we call these warm leads. But they are only warm for so long, and then it can be really difficult to revive them. So please, please, please be ready to take action. And hopefully as you start to craft your strategy, this list of things to consider is helpful. But if you want to cut to the chase, a simpler and more distilled way to think about it is what AJ Steinberg of Queen Bee Fundraising says. And she recommends that there be 3 post-event thank you touches. And she says anything less is not enough. And I really agree with her. And so as a general guideline, you want to make sure that all of your outreach is designed to make your donor the hero, and that everything that you communicate is replete with details giving them updates on their impact. And she recommends that you execute these communications a minimum of 3 times over a 2 to 3 month period. And then my feeling is if you can find ways to keep wowing them throughout the year and thereafter, then just go you. This is what I call giving without asking, and something that I talk about a lot in other webinars as well. Just as much as possible, you want to shower people with love and gratitude and updates so they remember you and they feel valued. So to wrap up, let's review the action steps that we started with right at the beginning. The most important of which is that you ensure your special events have digital legs from the beginning. It's a lot harder to integrate them as an afterthought, especially if you skip that online registration step. So online registration is your most important thing. And then after that, most critically, you want to remember to have a pre-event marketing strategy. You want to plan for on-site digital engagement and post-event stewardship. So those are your 3 buckets, and then hopefully the digital gears help you sort of navigate that and figure out what will be the right thing for you. Before we move into Q&A, I want to obviously give a big shout out to Bloomerang. We love working with them. Stephen said a lot of kind things about me, but I think you all know he is an amazing thought leader in this space, as in Bloomerang in general, a major contributor to the sector, and we're really grateful to them for their partnership. While you continue to send over some questions to Stephen for Q&A, now's the time if you haven't already. For a moment, if it's okay with you guys, I want to talk for a minute about our mantra, which is to educate without expectations. It's something that we really believe in at Firespring. It's why we do these talks and just do what we can to give back to the sector. I want to be really clear that I'm going to turn the corner for just a second here, and I'd like to educate with some expectation, if that's okay, and share a little bit about Firespring. I mean, I think Stephen told you we are in the business of websites for nonprofits, and we think that we help solve a pain point, probably the biggest digital pain point for most nonprofits out there that are not probably investing adequately in their website as they should be today, because what we've learned is that your website really is the digital home for your organization, and it may very well be the very first experience that somebody has with your organization. And so you want to make sure that it's not a brochure anymore, but that it's set up to really kind of engage with them and bring them into that funnel. To do that, it's got to be easy for you to use. I think typically when I talk to a nonprofit, they tell me they've got something like 10 to 15 tabs open to do the business of their day-to-day, and it's complicated, or they're just dealing with a website with a lot of technical debt, a volunteer who is not as available, or a developer that's really expensive. And Firespring, our tool is a content management system with all of the digital tools that you see in these puzzle pieces built in, so you actually can be in the driver's seat. And then it's all anchored with our legendary support and training, where you can actually talk to a real person. And like in Nebraska, there's no additional fee. It's just part of the way that we do business, and try to help put you and your team in the driver's seat of your website, so that it can be updated and have all the features and communications that you need to keep people hooked on what you're doing. I'm not sure why the slides are repeating themselves. I'm really sorry about that, guys. My bad. What you can do when you're dealing with Firespring is actually have a website in as little as 10 days, which is kind of cool. And it's because we are a software as a service platform, meaning it is a customizable website, not a custom website. And so you sign on, and then we can help you pick the right plan for you, which you can see here, and then customize the website to your liking. It's really, the technology represents about $50,000 worth of tools, but you don't have to pay that to have it built custom for you, and you can just pay a low monthly, get all the tools that a nonprofit needs, and then reach out to our team to help you and train you. I like to think of Firespring as being kind of turnover proof, so your whole team could literally disappear. But you have a website with Firespring, the next team members come in, they call us, we get you in, we get you trained, and we move you forward. So that's a nice kind of piece of security. You can do it yourself. We also have all of these additional services. I will say that the top one people typically use is for us to help migrate the content, because that's just seems to be the biggest barrier to a new website. And so what we wanted to do for our friends at Bloomerang and your community is offer the first 10 who sign up from this webinar 15% off on professional services. And so you can get in touch through the survey at the end and let us know if you'd like to chat, or you can actually just open up a browser right now and go to firespring.org/demo, fill out a really small form, and then someone from our team will be in touch, and just let them know that you heard me on Bloomerang today. If you enjoyed this webinar, we hope that you'll keep learning with us, and that we'll see you online at a new webinar. You can check out the public lineup at firespring.org/webinars. We're always adding new things, and we'd love to connect with you again in that way. And then I know Stephen would love to get your feedback, and Firespring cares about it as well. So there's a survey at the end. If you don't mind filling it out, that would be really appreciated. I think it takes just like 20 seconds, but it's great to hear what you thought of the content. And with that, I'd love to invite Stephen back on for a few questions if there are any. Stephen, are you there?
All right. Man, I knew that was going to be a good one. That was awesome, Dana. Thanks so much. Really good
You're
stuff.
welcome.
And that's a new presentation. I knew this one was going to be good when I picked it out of your list of ideas. I knew it was going to be good. Well, cool. We got some time for questions. I know it's getting close to the 2 o'clock hour, so I won't keep people too long. But Dana, is it fair to say you'll take questions maybe by email or Twitter, or can people get a hold of you after? Is that cool?
Totally, yep. On the screen here, you've got my handle, and also if you email hello@Firespring, we'll get you totally taken care of.
Nice. And I love Firespring, by the way. They're the only website vendor that we recommend at Bloomerang, because they do really awesome work. And obviously, they got smart people there, like Dana. So you should work with them. So that's my little spiel on Firespring, too. Okay, so we got some cool questions here. One from Julia. Engagement during the event from attendees, is that as simple of making sure you create a hashtag for the event and including that in like the pre-event communications? What ideas do you have for encouraging like event attendees to kind of be talking about the event while they're there?
Sure. So definitely you want to have that hashtag. you want to make sure that you're using like your a mix of digital and non-digital tools to be engaging them. So if you have an MC, right, you can have the MC even have a moment where you say like, everyone take out your phone and take a selfie and post it to Facebook and say something about, you know, the great time you're having here and use the hashtag, right? And then you would automatically get a ton of really awesome content to collect. I would also recommend, you know, with any collateral that you have on the table, whether it's digital in the form of iPads or actual physical collateral, or maybe posters that you have around the room, or even, you know, I think it's fun to like post things on the inside of bathroom stalls because we know everyone's on their phone in the bathroom and they're bored, and so it gives them something to do. So there's a lot of cool things, but definitely the hashtag helps keep a branding element. It helps you find the content. And I think, you know, people have to be prompted. If you wanted to have some sort of engagement around donations during the event, you know, again, there's various things you could do. So when you make everyone bring their phone out together, you're creating a little bit of subtle social pressure. You could also drop an email. So you can use, you know, third-party email systems and time it so that like the email drops and then people don't have to be typing in a URL, and you just say, have your MC say, okay, we just sent you a special email. Go open up your email right now and, you know, click on that link, and, you know, maybe you're going to do some sort of contest for like everybody who donates within this particular period of time, which, by the way, you could have people who are not in attendance also participate, and again, try and create that like virtual doors opening. But those are some great ways to get people to get involved.
That makes sense. It really just comes down to asking, right? I mean, people aren't going to post about you if you don't ask them, or very few will, I guess, if you don't ask them. So ask them.
That is true, and it's a very good point, because I think when people think about the internet and when they think about social media, I think we tend to think that it will just kind of move itself, that things go viral on their own, that that people will post just because they think about it. And some people will, but most people don't. So that's why it's this whole don't ask, don't get mentality. You have to remind them, you have to prompt them, you need to come up with strategic ways to get them to want to get involved. So I think that's a really important point.
Cool. Along that note, permission. Should you have like photo release forms if you're going to have event photographers and be, you know, posting photos on social media during and after? What's kind of your strategy on making sure you don't maybe tick somebody off who doesn't want to be photographed and then, you know, put online?
Yeah, no, that's a fair point. I mean, number one, I always recommend just talk to your lawyer, you know, because that's going to be the, you know, like, don't listen to me, talk to your lawyer. But I think, listen, if you're dealing with events with kids, then absolutely you're going to have to deal with permissions and things like that. If you're dealing with events with non-children, I think it actually runs the gamut, and it kind of on some level depends on the population you're dealing with. But even if you think about like pre-internet, how people would like take pictures at these events and put them in the society pages, like I don't think that people were necessarily, you know, signing releases. At the same time, there are probably, you know, there are some simple things that you could do, like if you do an online registration form and you can have 5 print or even a checkbox that says, you know, I understand there will be a photographer at this event, and that you know, my picture may end up somewhere. So I think, and then there's also just the part about having some good judgment, right? So if like there are certain things happening at the event that you think, like, what if you have people who are over 18 but they're more like in the you know, applying to college phase or applying to grad school phase? Maybe you want to be careful about, like, are you posting pictures with people drinking or whatever it might, like, I think you need to be sensitive to like different scenarios. But for the most part, at the end of the day, this is about good, clean fun, right? And this is about just showcasing cool things that are happening at your event, crowds that are there, people smiling, people getting involved, because this is what creates social proof. And people need to see it to believe it. And that's one of the things that social media really does for us. It gives us a quick and easy, broad platform to raise our social profile and remind people that we are an event that is, an organization that is a happen in place, that is live and kicking, that people want to support and make it, people are like sheep. They want to do what other people do. So if you can create that kind of presence, and obviously visuals do that, then that's going to be an important part of your strategy to grow that visibility.
Love it. Well, cool. Man, this has been great, Dana, and we're a little over time, so I don't want to keep people too long in case I haven't had lunch. I know we didn't get to all the questions, so please do reach out to Dana. Obviously, she's a wealth of knowledge. I know there's a lot of questions in here that are pretty specific, and I want to be able to do them justice and not by just a little sound bite at the end of a webinar. So reach out to her. She's an awesome person, obviously. But thanks for being here, Dana. Thanks for taking an hour out of your day and hanging out with us. It was fun.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure. Thank you all so much. Like I said, you have all the information to be in touch. Oh, good. Steve just flipped the screen there so you have the information. And just, those are great questions. I don't know if I've ever gotten those ones before. So thanks for that. Thanks for having me. We hope to see you online in the future. And, just obviously always a big plug and lots of love for Bloomerang. Our tools integrated with each other, and we really think that they're one of the best CRM systems out there and just treat their people right. So if you haven't checked them out, definitely do that.
Oh, thank you. You guys are great. Well, yeah, this is a smart group. The questions here are usually really good. We got a smart group that hangs out on the Bloomerang webinars, so we have a lot of fun. Speaking of webinars, we're going to keep it going every Thursday. We got a great one week from today. We're going to stay on kind of the digital train here. We got Rachel Clemens, who is going to bring us a session that she did actually at the AFP conference last month. It's going to be a good one. 45 examples of digital fundraising in 45 minutes. It's going to be fast-paced, but you're going to see a lot of real-life examples that you can not steal, but maybe draw inspiration from is maybe a better way to put that. So register for that one if it sounds good to you. Hopefully it does. We'd love to see you on another Thursday webinar. And if not, there's plenty of other sessions that you can check out well into the rest of the year. So look for an email from me with the slides and the recording. I'll get that out to you today. And hopefully we'll see you again next week. So have a good rest of your Thursday. Have a good weekend, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Thank you. Please stand by.